Hello. Welcome to This Week in Politics. Well, there's two topics I wanted to cover today. One of them has to do with the Mueller investigation, the phoniness of it. It's what it did, the reason it did it. And then the other one is the tech giants are trying to take away our First Amendment rights of free speech. And we can't let that happen. So I'm going to take a look at both of those in depth. But before I do that, and I said I wasn't going to address this until new information came out about the Vegas mass shooting, and there has been some information, both of them proven to be phony, but I want to put it out there so that everybody can see it and recognize it for the phony that it is. Okay, first off, let's talk about Campos. Now, I have some serious questions about this whole way this whole thing was handled. Although the timeline has changed 3 times from Campos, though he's alive and an eyewitness, but yet nobody has given the time that he supposedly made his 2 phone calls. He supposedly made 2 phone calls. One to the front desk to report that that there was shots, and secondly to the police department to tell them that he was under fire. No timeline. Now, they managed to get the timeline after 3 or 4 attempts down to where nobody's going to get sued over it, supposedly, but nobody's gotten the time the phone call was made, and I think that's critical. Nobody has talked about how he got out of the first time he went for the interviews and he got out. Remember, a few days later, he came out and was on the, I'm not even going to give her a plug, was on a certain TV show, and he was walking on crutches. So how did he get out of that original place with nobody seeing him? Nobody's managed to answer that question. There were 2 rooms that he had, I mean, they were not connected, and windows were punched out in both windows, and nobody has told us what the exact location of the shooting was. We have seen the leaked pictures of the dead body. There is no way that that was the primary shooter because of the number of shell casings on the floor. The sheriff says there was around 1,000 shots fired. There was not 1,000 bullet casings on that floor. Now, here's a really interesting question that nobody has bothered to ask yet. So, if Campos made the phone call to the front desk and the cops were already there in the Mandalay Bay, as soon as the cops were notified, they were told, our guy is on the 32nd floor, there's an active shooter. Now, right? If you go through and listen to what and how the cops are organizing, they're starting from floor 1 all the way to floor 32. They're talking about floor 29 and 31 and floor 4. I don't understand that at all. If I'm a cop and somebody says there's a shooting on the 32nd floor, I get my cop buddies, we go to the 32nd floor and look for the shooter. So that whole thing about Campos, that whole thing is a lie. It's all a lie. The thing about the gloves. In the picture of the dead body, we see his left hand on a glove, and the cops say it was because he had allergies allergies to industrial cleaners, and he told the staff to not use certain cleaners in his apartment. Okay, so if they're not using industrial cleaners in his apartment, why is he wearing his gloves in his apartment? First problem with that story. Second problem is, if you go through and look at all the available photographs, and from the ones I've seen, there's probably about 12 or 15 available, inside and outside, in a hotel and with his family. Not once is he wearing a glove. Never. But now all of a sudden, on the night of the shooting, he shows up with a glove on. And we're supposed to believe. Now, I think he was wearing a glove because the people who actually did the shooting and killed him were wearing gloves, and there would be no fingerprints on the guns or on the bullets or on the bullet casings. So in order to make that look like he did it, they put gloves on him. That's the accurate story, in my opinion. The story the Las Vegas Police Department giving us, again, is phony. And the thing about Campos is phony. Now, here's some questions about Campos. When did he go to Mexico? And by the way, he did not get shot. The Las Vegas Police Department said he got shot for 2 weeks. We find out now, no, he didn't get shot. He just had a piece of a splinter of wood go into his foot. They called it shrapnel, but any time a bullet hits anything and shatters off and hits you, that's considered shrapnel, whether it's drywall or wood or metal or steel, it's shrapnel. So what hospital did he go to? Who waited on him? I mean, who took care of him? When did he get back from Mexico? Now, we know that the MGM is putting Campos up in a room because he is too traumatic to deal with it. So they're giving him free room and board to stay there. Why? It would appear to me that if you're running a legitimate business with the MGM and there's a mass shooting and you want to provide sanctuary for those that are traumatically involved, you would have contacted the 58 families of the 58 victims who were killed and offered them free rooms, not the key witness to the shooting. And here's another one that just blows me away. So we have one witness. There's one witness in this whole thing that can finger who shot the gun, what room it came out of, how many shots were fired down the hall, exactly what time it was happened, and his footprints. One guy. Why is the sheriff allowing Campos to be taken in by the MGM, who actually could be considered an accessory after the fact of a mass murder? Think about that. Why is the sheriff allowing that? If it was a person, if it was my house where that shooting had come from, and I owned a rental house, and there was a witness that saw shooting coming from my house, and he was so traumatized because he got a splinter in his foot that I said, oh, why don't I put you up in my rental house for free for room and board? For all they know, I could be an accessory after the fact. What if I was complicit in the murder? What if I knew about the murder in advance? What if I helped in the murder? What if I provided cover for the people who did the murder? In any of those instances, the MGM grant is an accessory after the fact, and the owners and managers of that hotel are liable. And yet, it's poppycock. So anyway, all of those things are all phony. Still more questions than answers. Oh, I forgot to tell you. On October 1st, an interviewer, I'm assuming he's a member of the press, did an interview with the sheriff, Sheriff Lombard of the Las Vegas Police Department, or Sheriff's Department, And it lasted an hour and 9 minutes, if I remember right. I watched the whole thing from beginning to end. And I made some observations. Number one, that was not an interview. That was a staged event. I believe those questions were written in advance, okayed by the sheriff and the FBI, and the answers were predetermined. That was a fluff piece put out by the MGM with the sheriff in being complicit with them to make the appearance of being open. There was no questions asked of any of the stuff that I have covered. They did ask about the video from the hotel, and the sheriff said, we had so many terabytes to go through, but we're about 90 to 95% done. To which my response is, okay, so the FBI can go through 30,000 emails and determine whether they are fit to be released or not and redact what needs to be redacted in less than a week, and you can't get by a couple of days of video from watching outside of an apartment. Again, that's not accurate. So they do this staging. Now, here's another observation I made. If you haven't seen the interview, they are sitting in chairs facing each other, and the lights are on them, and everything else around them is dark. I mean, you can't tell what room you're in. You can't tell what kind of a building you're in. You can't even tell what is directly behind either one of them. The lighting is such that all you see is those two. For all, as I said, for all we know, they're sitting in a hotel room at the MGM or the conference room, or they're sitting by a pool, or they're sitting in the sheriff's office, or they're sitting in the sheriff's home. We don't know because of the way the lighting was done. And I believe that lighting was done that way for a reason. Again, it adds another layer of hiding. Why is it important that we not know where that interview took place? And if it's not important, why did you bother to do that with the lighting? If you've ever done anything with video, you know that in order to make that atmosphere happen, that takes a lot of work to make those lights happen. And yet they went to the trouble to do that. There has to be a reason. I'd like to know the answer to that. So anyway, I'm done with that. Okay, so the first topic I want to talk about was the Mueller investigation. Bob Mueller was appointed a special counsel to investigate a non-existent crime for a sitting president, and we have gone through in painfully grave detail how this all came about. And I'm going to give you a thumbnail sketch of what happened. There was a phony dossier that I'm calling the P file. And this P file was used, it's all fiction, none of it can ever be proved. And everybody involved knows that. Yet the P file was used to get information. Comey used it to make leaks. And he admitted this under oath that he did this with the sole purpose of getting a special prosecutor to go after Trump. So the special prosecutor, Bob Mueller, used to be the head of the FBI. So we have the current head of the FBI committing felonies to get the ex-head of the FBI, both Democrats and swamp rats, by the way, to go after a sitting president. Now, the rules say that in order to get a special prosecutor, there has to be a specific crime that he's investigating. There is no crime. The justification they used for the crime was the P file, and the P file is all fiction. We know this to be a fact. And yet they go on. Now, as soon as it was made known that we know this as a fact, Bob Mueller pulls out an indictment, and he leaks it on Friday, which again is a felony. But he was trying to ramp up interest in what he's doing because he's basically become irrelevant. Everybody in the country knows there's nothing there except the ultra left-wing libs who hold out hope against everything. So the indictment he gets is against Bob Manafort, or Paul Manafort, and his campaign staff, Deputy Richard Gates. Now, they are charged with some serious crimes. Most of them have to do with, in fact, all of them have to do with hiding money, money laundering, having accounts offshore, all of those kinds of issues. Are they serious? Absolutely. Are they punishable? Absolutely. But it all happened before they had anything to do with Trump. None of it has anything to do with Trump. Well, then you ask yourself, well, why are they doing it then? Well, because they want to have a hammer over Paul Manafort's head and try to beat him into submission so he will give up whatever information he has on Trump. And I got news for him. There's nothing there for him to know. But again, Mueller has nothing. And the only thing he thinks he might have is what Paul Manafort might know. There's nothing there. So, but anyway, that's what the whole indictment was about. That's why they were taken into custody, because Mueller wants relevance. He needs to justify his huge staff and his huge expenses. And all he's got is Paul Manafort with stuff that happened before he was even associated with Trump, which proves he has nothing. The main issue with Paul Manafort is he was an election advisor. You know, he would find a candidate and the candidate would pay him to help him get elected. Well, he helped a guy in the Ukraine, Victor Yanukovych, I think. I'm close. He lost, by the way, but he was paid well over 20-some million dollars to get this guy elected. Now, he did a couple of things wrong. He didn't register as a agent for a foreign government, which you're supposed to do. Few people do it, and when they are caught, they're just kindly asked to please register. Well, Mueller's going to make this a federal issue. But what he did with the money is put it offshore and moved it through different banks, and that's money laundering, and that's a serious offense. That's an income tax issue, though. That is not, I mean, it is criminal, but it's not anything to do with collusion or Trump or elections or anything like that. This is an income tax issue that Manafort or Mueller is trying to use for political gain. Remember, to get Trump is not a legal issue. It is a political issue. All Mueller really has to do is to create the illusion that there was a sin or a crime. You know, he's not going to be trying a legal case in front of a court and judge. He's going to be presenting the case to the House of Representatives and the Senate. There's a big difference. The indictment had 12 counts in them against each of them. And here's the interesting observation that gets me. You have to ask yourself about the timing of the indictments. So let's think about that. What happened shortly before the indictments? And what happened shortly after the indictments? What happened shortly before the indictments was the Las Vegas shooting. Was the Hillary revelation. Was the Uranium One announcement. Which, by the way, that is a felony and, in my opinion, treason. And the mainstream media has not reported one bit of it. Not one. I don't know what they're thinking, or what do they think they're going to hide it? Do they think there's no other way to get news and information? Boy, you talk about fake news. Trump's got it right. So the timing of the indictment, which the mainstream media has run with for a week now, okay? took up all the talk shows. So from Manafort's point of view, it is to have relevance at the table to justify his budget and his staff and his existence. The mainstream media is eating it up because it's taking attention away from the whole Hillary issue. The swamp likes it because it's taking attention away from the Las Vegas shooting. So the Justice Department is happy, the FBI is happy, the CIA is happy, Mueller is happy, all the left-wing Democrats are happy, but still no truth, no proof coming out of Vegas. Oh, shortly after that, there was another terrorist attack in New York where 8 people were run over by a truck. And the guy that did it, they caught him, and he's happy about it. He bragged about it. So all of these things are happening all at one time, and the Hillary thing is getting buried. So everybody involved is happy except the administration, the Tea Party, and the people in this country who want truth and justice. Remember the old saying in the cartoon, truth, justice, and the American way? Well, where did that go? Now we're all about lies, the swamp, and covering stuff up. But the timing of the indictment was very, very interesting to me. You know, I've often taught about the shiny ball. Watch the shiny ball, but don't pay attention to the 58 people I killed over here. Let's talk about a piece of paper that's an indictment that might do something, but it really proves nothing, so you don't pay attention to the 58 people I just killed. So here are some of the charges that Mueller is bringing against Paul Manafort. Money laundering, failure to register as a foreign agent, conspiracy to conceal accounts, and failure and conspiracy to conceal the money from the government. Those are all serious. So what he's going to try to do now is he's going to try to squeeze Paul Manafort. And even if he does get him to say something, even if it's a lie, you got to ask yourself, these are serious charges. These are not just going to go away. So what incentive does Manafort really have? I mean, okay, so they take conspiracy off. They still got money laundering. That's a lot. That could be a life sentence. Now, I see this playing out one of 2 ways, or 3 ways possibly. Number one, Paul Manafort does know something and negotiates a sentence down. He still does jail time, but it extends the life of the special counsel and gives him ammunition to go after Trump. Scenario number 1. Scenario number 2, Manafort has nothing, but Mueller gets him to lie under oath about something against Trump, in which it extends the investigation, justifies Manafort, and gives him something to go after Trump with, so that Trump now has to prove he's innocent. The third possible scenario is Manafort has nothing, doesn't negotiate, goes to court, gets convicted, and Trump issues a pardon. Now, I don't know the timing, the legal things about timing of a pardon. Can you issue a pardon before somebody is convicted? But as long as Manafort keeps his mouth shut, I mean, if he knows something, tell him. But as long as he doesn't lie, I believe Trump will step in at some point and issue the pardon. If Manafort lies on Trump or gives Mueller any ammunition, he could kiss that pardon goodbye. That will never happen. So those are the 2 ways I see it going out. Now, also, on the same day that the indictment was reported to the press, there was a guy by the name of George Papadopoulos. And this guy was a young guy, 30 years old, trying to make a name for himself. He was an unpaid volunteer. and he pled guilty to lying to the FBI. Now, that's a crime, and he admitted to it, but what he lied about was silliness. You know, this is one of the games that special counsels use. They use it's called a process crime. You know, what you have to say really has no impact on the case, but if you lie to them under oath and they catch you, now they have something to hold over your head and to squeeze you. So this George Papadopoulos, who admitted to lying to the FBI, they say he was a foreign policy advisor to Trump, um, an unpaid foreign advisor. I find that hard to believe, but let's assume that's true. They did ask Trump about Papadopoulos because Papadopoulos said that he was in a meeting with Trump and Jeff Sessions and talked about setting up a meeting between Trump and Putin to talk about the election. And Sessions says that he shut it, or Papadopoulos said he shut that down immediately, said not to do it, don't pursue it any further. They asked Trump about it. Trump says, I barely remember the meeting. It was an unimportant meeting and nothing happened. I tend to believe Trump. Because shortly after this Papadopoulos admitted guilt to lying to the FBI, he was trying to get a book deal. He was shopping it all around New York trying to get a book deal to tell his story. Again, still trying to give himself some credibility. So that happened this week. The Mueller investigation handed down indictment against Paul Manafort, who used to be the campaign chairman for Trump, and Paul Manafort's deputy and business partner by a guy by the name of Deputy Richard Gates. And they had a closed trial for this Paul Papadopoulos, and that also was released on the same day that the indictment was released. Again, all smoke and mirrors, no fire, no flame. There's nothing there for Trump to worry about. As the new saying is these days, it's a nothing burger. There's nothing there. So those of us that are Trump supporters, we're not the least bit concerned about it. Those that are left wingers, they're all giddy about it. They think they finally got him. But if you follow it closely, you'll understand there's nothing there. Now, the next topic, and this really is the main topic I wanted to talk about. And in the intro, I said the tech giants are trying to take away our First Amendment right of free speech. This has been an ongoing effect, and I had Okay, I do another show called The Right Wing Reverend, and I've been doing that for 4 or 5 years. And I have been watching Facebook and Zuckerberg for a while, thinking it was only him that was doing it. This last week, it was shown that no, it includes Google and Twitter and Facebook. And what they're doing and what the government is doing is very, very frightening. And we as Americans need to stand up and tell them, no, we don't want this. So let me give you just a little synopsis of what has been going on. Before the election, the government kept saying we need to control fake news. That was the term, fake news, on social media. And they were not singling out Russia or anything. They were just saying fake news. And for those of us that are on social media, it's very, very easy to spot fake news. And by the way, while we're on the topic, I can't think of anybody in my whole life that has made any decision to who to vote for based on something they saw on social media. It's just, it's a straw man that they're building up so that they can tear it down with the logic that they want to use. That's what's happening here. But I want to show to you the game that they're playing. So anyway, there was, and mostly it was Zuckerberg who was getting the headlines at the time, and I'll get into why in a minute. And Zuckerberg kept saying that is not the role of social media. This is a place where people come to hang out. They have free speech. They can do what they want. Now remember, all the way up until 9 o'clock on election day, everybody that were Democrats knew that Hillary's going to win in a landslide, right? Zuckerberg is an ultra left wing. So the whole time he's saying this, he thinks Hillary's going to win. So if Hillary's going to win, I mean, look at it from Zuckerberg's standpoint. If Hillary's going to win, then the only person the fake news is going to hurt is Trump, right? Okay. So now you see the motivation. Okay. So Hillary loses, and immediately after that, Zuckerberg comes out and publicly says, we need to control fake news, which is diametrically opposed to what he had said just a few weeks before. Now, this has all been documented in the Wall Street Journal. You can go back and do the research, and I'm going to go over some articles here in a minute so that we can see it. And somewhere in there was an article that said that Zuckerberg wants to run for president in 2020. So now let's think about that. If you own Facebook and you know that if there is such a thing as fake media, and if people really do make decisions based on that, and you are planning on running for president, you need to control fake news. So he comes out and says he's going to control fake news. Well, here's what he does. He doesn't have the stones to do it himself or to do it in-house, so that he'd have to take a beating. So he tells the world that he's going to appoint 3 independent news agencies to find and have different levels of prosecution against pages or people or accounts on Facebook when they spit out fake news. First off, all 3 of these that he chose were ultra left-wing liberal organizations, okay? So let's say that you are a left-winger. What are you going to consider fake news? Anything that promotes the right wing or goes against your candidate. That's who's, so anything that does that. So my point is, who decides what's fake news? If Breitbart had come out 6 months ago and said, Hillary Clinton is guilty of selling 20% of our uranium to the Russians, do you think these independent agencies would have called that fake news and pulled it? Absolutely. But here we are 6 months later, and guess what? It wasn't fake news, it was true. The only reason they would have called it fake news back then is because their ox was being gored. We have the facts, we have the timeline, we have the witnesses for everything about Hillary. Why she's not being prosecuted has to do with the swamp, and that's another story. So anyway, so he sets up this phony thing to get fake news. And on my page, I can see a lot of people are being affected by that. They are going after right-wingers. As an example, one of the guys on my face page was suspended for a month, I believe, for writing that Muslims were out to commit jihad or to kill Americans. It's a fact. They will tell you that. But he was suspended for a month from Facebook. When he wrote in to ask why, he referenced an account where there was two homosexual males engaged in sex on Facebook. And Facebook wrote him back and said, that does not violate our standards, but you do. Okay. When those kind of judgments are being made, my question becomes empirical. Who decides what is fake news? Now, my original thought on this is I thought it was all Facebook, and I wanted to leave Facebook and take my followers and go to a different website. However, the government must have figured that out, because now they have taken this fake news and gone with this Russian narrative. Again, as a result of the P file. But they're using the information in the P file to justify the Russian collusion, and the Russian collusion stems off of Russian interference in the election, which stems off of Russian phony ads and accounts on public media. You see how that whole chain of events worked? And it all starts with the P file. And the P file is all fake. So you got to ask yourself, if the government knows that the P file is fake, that the Russian thing is fake, that the collusion is fake, then why are they calling in Facebook, Google, and Twitter and using the P file as a method to control accounts in social media? There's only one answer. They want to control free speech. So they called these three in. Now, these three, when they testified, they did not come themselves. They sent their attorneys. Again, kind of odd. So you have to ask yourself, why did they send their attorneys instead of Bezos and Zuckerberg and whoever's in charge of Twitter? How come they didn't go themselves? There's a reason for that. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm guessing because if they are under oath, they don't want to be caught in the trap of being caught in an inadvertent lie. So they sent attorneys to handle that for them. Pretty smart in my opinion. But under oath, the attorney for Facebook admitted that the majority of the ads that the Russians had came after the election, and they were anti-Trump. So think about that for a minute. First off, the number of accounts they found was a couple of thousand phony accounts, okay? They have billions of accounts. It's infinitesimal. What they found was nothing. And the ads that they found were so fake, it's obvious. I mean, that nobody would ever make a decision based on any of those ads. You could do the research and go find it, but it's silliness. They're trying to build a mountain out of a molehill, or building up this straw man so that they could go after free speech. Now, remember, these are liberals investigating liberals for a liberal agenda. That's what's happening here. So the accounts, some of the ads that were listed were pro-Islam, they were anti-Trump, they were pro-Hillary, and the ones that I saw, I thought they were just humorous. I mean, a couple of the ads I had seen, and I just laughed at it and moved on. Doesn't mean anything. But you have to remember, if Zuckerberg wants to be president, he's going to have to control the language, because even on Facebook, there is a large contingent of conservatives, Christians, and Republicans who are on there. And we have become very vociferous because we're sick and tired of the left wing controlling the narrative. And Zuckerberg and the swamp rats in Washington understand that. So they're trying to get a control over it. That's why they called in all three of them. And that's why they're building up this straw man, this fake issue, so that they can issue complaints and regulations to control our free speech. That's why Zuckerberg has done a complete change in 1 year. The ads are being used as a tool to limit free speech. Yes, that's true. They are not the government. Why is it okay for them to control speech? They are looking for cover from government directives. So at first appearance, it would look like that the government called them into the office. But let's say that Zuckerberg wants to limit speech, just like he did when he appointed those 3 independent agencies to root out fake news. Remember, he's the one that kept saying that the Russians interfered, and he found accounts, and there was fake advertisements. Remember, he's the one that kept bringing that to the government. The government wasn't asking, he just kept saying it. So finally, the government tells all 3 of them to come in so they can be interviewed. It appears to me that Zuckerberg and Bezos and whoever does Twitter, they are all looking to control the narrative on their sites, but they can't or won't do it because it will jeopardize their standing. So what they want is they want the government to issue directives to control speech. So now Zuckerberg and Bezos and the other guy can all say, hey, we're going to control the narrative, and it's not us, it's the government. We had nothing to do with it. We're just innocent pawns caught in a nasty game. If you have any issues, go deal with the government. Don't, tell it to the hand because the face ain't listening. That's what is going on here. They do want to control the narrative. The government and Bezos and Zuckerberg and that whole cadre. Their whole goal here is to control the narrative. Make no mistake at all about that. So now what I want to do is I want to go through some ads here that I found is interesting, mostly about Facebook. This one is from September 14. And the headline reads, Facebook stresses brand safety in video advertising. Okay. The headline is telling us brand safety. That's the key word there in video advertising. So how are you going to brand safety a company in video advertising? You're going to control the advertising. You see what's happening here? Inch by inch, it's a cinch. So right now they can't control free speech. They're trying to muzzle it with the 3 independents, and they're working on another angle from the government, but here they're wanting to control advertising dollars and people and who they advertise. And I'm going to give you an example as soon as I read this. As Facebook Incorporated ramps up its new, and it's got in quotes, in-stream video advertising, the social media company is attempting to avoid the brand safety headaches that have plagued rivals such as YouTube in recent months. Facebook on Wednesday introduced new monetization eligibility standards, it said, are designed to provide more clear guidance on the types of content that will be allowed to have advertising run alongside it on the platform. Okay. Let me break that down for you. So Facebook can't control free speech yet. So if you have everybody in a group here, okay, and you want to eliminate the riffraff, but you consider to be riffraff, how do you do that? You consider a level above them that makes it so that people want to be in this level. And so when watchers go to your site, they're going to go to this level, and the riffraff is going to be secondary. So here's what Facebook did. They created a channel called Watch. And I know about this simply because one of the people that I follow on Facebook was picked to be on this Watch. So Facebook is putting out billions of dollars to get this thing started. They get the technology done right. They get the advertisers lined up, and they picked, I don't know, over 1,000 different channels and pages that they were going to promote up to this upper level. Now, out of all of those channels, there was 2 conservative sites. And the guy that I follow was one of them. And the name of his program, by the way, I'd like to give him a plug, is Deep Six, the Deep State. Okay. So anyway, he was up and he was very happy. And here's why. In order to incentivize these guys to go up here, Facebook was going to work in advertising. So this guy was doing his program just like I'm doing this one. And every so often throughout the program, he would say, okay, we're going to have to pause for 10 seconds. They'd put a 10-second little ad on, and he'd come back and do the show. A little while later, another 10-second blurb. And they did that for a week or two. Okay, and he got money, and advertising came in. And then all of a sudden, I noticed that he would take the 10-minute break and no advertising would be on his show. And I thought, well, that's odd. And that went on for about a week. So everybody else, it was still being done. The breaks were still being taken. You could see it being cut, the feed being cut, but there was no ads running on his site. So what Facebook did is exactly what he said he was going to do here in September. Now, let me read it to you again. It was designed to provide more clear guidance on the types of content that will be allowed to have advertising. So the content on the show that I follow is conservative Republican content. And he got no advertising because Zuckerberg is controlling the content by not putting the advertising. You see what's going on? This is very nefarious. Now, it just so happened, had this been just a guy that was out there to make money, he'd drop off of Watch and move on, and then Facebook would bring up a liberal to do that. And there'd be all kind of funding for him. It's very nefarious, very underhanded, very sly, and very, very sneaky way to control content, to control free speech, and think of all of the people that are down here. When you're friends with somebody on Facebook and whatever they post comes across your feed, and if they move this up, this is now going to have priority. So if you have 1,000 programs coming on and you're friends with 1 or 2 of them or follow them, their feed is going to be continuous coming into. So now it blocks out all these guys down here, which is what Zuckerberg's trying to do. And they said it right here. But if you didn't read that article carefully, you didn't catch what was going on. I kept these articles simply because I knew what was coming, and I did some shows on it simply because I thought it was very, very nefarious. Okay, so this article is from October 31st. And the headline reads, Russia Facebook post had wider reach. Firm will lift estimate of potential audience to 126 million people before Senate panel. Facebook Incorporated estimates that about 126 million people may have seen content posted by Russian-backed accounts over more than 2 years that sought to disrupt American society and blah, blah, blah. Okay. 126 million sounds like a lot. 126 million people over 2 years. Okay. And let's think about that for a minute. Facebook has over 1 billion people on Facebook. If each person gets on there once a week, that's 1 billion people a week. Over 2 years is 104 billion people that are watching. 126 million is nothing. That is nothing. But when you say it like they're putting it here, 126 million sounds like a lot. And they don't even say that 126 million saw it. It says 126 million may have seen. I know very good and well because I advertise on Facebook. I hate it, but if you want to reach people, you have to go where the big numbers are. They know exactly when you boost a post on Facebook, they come back and tell you you had this many clicks and this many views and this many that. So on every one of those ads, they know exactly the number of clicks and people that saw that. So when they write in here may have, that tells me that's a lie. It's nowhere near that number. In his testimony, Mr. Stretch plans to say that any amount of fake or malicious activity is too much, while at the same time playing down its importance. According to the prepared remarks, Mr. Stretch plans to argue that these posts were a small fraction of the content consumed by Americans during this period. 0.004% of posts, or 1 out of 23,000 pieces of content. Again, infinitesimal. But the reason I read that is he says one piece of fake news is one piece too many. Okay, that's a quaint little saying and it sounds great, but who decides? If I'm in charge of finding fake news, guess what I'm going to find out as fake news? Everything that's left wing or pro Hillary or pro Zuckerberg or pro anything out there, I'm going to call that fake news. Now, even if it's proven wrong, here's what happens. They're penalized, not allowed to put any more posts on for up to 30 days, or even have their page canceled. So now whoever wants to put that out now has to get out of jail. They have to do it, or, video jail. They have to set up a new website. They have to recreate the content. You see what's happening? It's kind of like the Lois Lerner thing in the IRS. They may very well eventually have gotten their 501c3, but they missed out being able to help in the election because they stalled, installed, and created work and paperwork and hoops to jump through so that the conservatives had no chance. Which, by the way, we still carry in Ohio, by the way. So, Lois Lerner, if you're watching, ha ha ha. But anyway, but that's the game they're playing. The new disclosures came as the tech industry is facing the threat of regulation. Okay. Here's what's happening. Now, when I finish reading this, you're going to see what I'm talking about. Senator Amy Klobuchar, a Democrat from Minnesota. Remember, this is liberals inquiring of liberals to promote a liberal agenda. So this is a liberal Democrat from Minnesota who has proposed a bill that would toughen disclosure rules for political advertising online, is expected to press the companies on their objections to regulation, according to a person with knowledge of the senator's plans. So this senator is already proposing legislation, and she wants to know why these companies are against it. And guess what? They're not. But in this last paragraph, we see what is going on with this whole issue. That what she's saying is, we're going to regulate. We just want to know what your objections are. So any objections that you have, we can address. But we are going to do regulation. Now, I want you to think about that. They're regulating free speech. We should be allowed to have free speech. Now, when you're in a legal class and they tell you, yes, you have free speech, but you can't run into a theater and yell fire. I agree with that. But to decide that the Russians, anything from Russia is fake news, or anything from the right is fake news, and who gets to decide and their political leanings, that is all uh, that is all information that should have nothing to do with free speech on Facebook. Now, in that same article, right below it, there is Facebook's CEO makes a return visit to China. Now, he has tried to get Facebook into China. China won't let him in because China wants everything regulated and censored, and Facebook hasn't been able to do that. But here he is, Zuckerberg is going back to China, just to give you an idea of what Zuckerberg is doing. LinkedIn, which gained access to China by agreeing to censor its content. So if you're on LinkedIn, they're already censoring content for local users and by forming a joint venture with Chinese partners. This year, Facebook invested $5 million in registered capital into Oculus virtual reality until it Shanghai nearly doubled the amount to 11.3 million. So in order to get into Russia, you have to control content. So LinkedIn already has the software, already has everything it needs to control software because it's doing it in China. And Zuckerberg obviously has the same capability because now he's returning to China to try to get in there, which means if he has the software here, it's just a matter of pushing a button here to get the same censorship. And this article ends by saying, if you think you can ever convince them about opening up to free speech platform like Facebook, forget it, one commander wrote. They just had a 19th Congress that reaffirmed their commitment for censorship and weeding out dissent, proving that Zuckerberg is pursuing what he knows to be, is going to be censorship. Why in the world is he doing that? Well, the market is huge and it's all about money and communism, and he is at heart a communist. And remember, his wife is Chinese, and he speaks Mandarin fluently. He thoroughly believes in everything that the Chinese do, and he has no problem at all with censoring free speech in this country to whatever he considers to be the greater good. Again, it comes back to the fact who controls and who decides what fake news is. Now, here's another one. Facebook is right to invest in cleaning up its network. This obviously is an op-ed piece that is going to say it's okay to clean up. Let's see what they mean by cleaning up. So Mark Zuckerberg's statement Wednesday, protecting our community is more important than maximizing our profits. Doesn't that sound really good? How's he going to do that? He said the company is now investing so much in security that it will affect future profitability. Let me rephrase that for you. Here's what he meant. He said the company is now investing so much in censorship that it will affect future profitability. That's what security. His definition of security is controlling content, i.e. censorship. Now, here's the part that really gets me. And here again, in this article, here's the key part that tells you the whole game plan, okay? Citing misuse of the three companies' platforms. Okay, let's stop right there. Misuse by whose definition? Remember, who decides? Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat of California. Well, there it is. So in this instant, a liberal Democrat from California is deciding that there was misuse on these three websites. She told the executives, you have to be the ones to do something about this or we will. Again, making it sound like it's going to be the government's issue, but the government really is doing exactly what the companies want. They want regulation so that they have to control they have somebody they could call a bad guy to control content. But that's the end game here, is to control free speech. Facebook plans to double the number of employees and contractors who handle safety and security issues to 20,000 by the end of 2018. It is redoubling security. Okay, that's just telling you how much they are investing in this. They're doubling the 20,000 people, plus the software, plus trying to get into China, plus manipulating Congress. He's doing all of this. He's spending all of this time and effort so that he can control what he and the liberals consider to be fake news. This is a nefarious plot. This is despicable. Americans, if we don't wake up and call an end to this, we are going to wake up one day and everything that we put on any social site is going to have to go through a filter, a left-wing liberal filter. And that will completely eliminate any dissent. And right now, the three players are Facebook, Google, which includes Yahoo, or no, which includes can't think of it, but Facebook, Google, and Twitter, the three big players. Over its failure to detect the way Russian propagandists used its platform to spread divisive content. 0.0004 people saw this, but they're making it a huge issue. The grilling raises the specter of regulation and added scrutiny, again, which could slow Facebook's growth and ability to rapidly develop new products. The crisis also put Facebook in the awkward position of playing down the effectiveness of Russian ads. What crisis? I don't see a crisis. I see the liberal Democrats trying to create a crisis. I don't see a crisis. Do you? They're creating, they use the word crisis. They're creating a crisis so that they can go in and fix it. Again, building up the straw man so that they can come in and chop it down. The company increased its monthly active user base. Oh, I was wrong. It wasn't a billion. 2.07 billion. And that's active user base from Facebook. Since the 2016 US presidential election, Facebook has faced immense criticism for allowing misinformation, propaganda, and violent videos to proliferate. Okay, first off, immense criticism from who? From the left, because Hillary lost and they can't get over it, so they're blaming somebody, and they're going to blame social media because social media has so much input into how people vote. That's the silliest logic I've ever heard. They're using it to control content. And unless we do something, this will happen by 2020, because they do not want Trump to be reelected, and they're covering every possible base. They will have regulation in controlling content, and it will be controlled by the left by 2020. Mark my words, it's coming. This is the reason I'm going through these ads and building you a stair step of how they're doing this. I want you to see this is an ongoing plan, a nefarious, behind the scenes, but out in the open, telling the American public, we are going to control the content. It's going to be controlled by the left, and the right is going to lose their voice on social media. That's what's happening. Let's see, Facebook accounts bought thousands of ads that sought to inflame social and political tensions before and after the election. Any ones that they bought before the election were pro-Hillary. The ones they bought after the election were pro-Hillary, anti-Trump. They had nothing to do with collusion in our election. If anything, the Russians interfered trying to help Hillary, not Trump. Facebook said 146 million users saw posts from accounts that linked to the Internet Research Agency. So they have 2.07 billion active users, and 146 million saw it. So if you have a billion and you have 146 million, that means 1.4% or half of it's 0.0004% of people saw those ads. And even if every single one of them changed their vote because of those ads, still wouldn't have made a difference in the election. Straw man. Okay, so the last one here. Yes, Russia adds targeted precise groups. Anti-Trump groups, of course. And throughout this article, this is a huge article. Let's see. The senators involved, one of them was Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia, Dianne Feinstein, a Democrat from California, that other Democrat lady from Wisconsin. So liberal Democrats, supposedly grilling liberal Democrats from the tech world. It's all fake, to control content. Let's see, Mark Zuckerberg said in a statement as part of Facebook's quarterly earnings Wednesday afternoon, protecting our community is more important than maximizing profits. He keeps using that word, protecting. What another word could be used there is controlling. Let me reread that. Controlling our community is more important than maximizing our profits. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Facebook General Counsel Colin Stinch said during the hearing, the Russian-backed Internet Research Agency spent $46,000 on ads ahead of the 2016 presidential election, compared with the combined $81 million in spending from Hillary Clinton on Donald Trump's campaigns prior to Election Day. Okay. I spend myself, just on my ad, I probably spend $2,000 or $3,000 a year, $4,000 a year on ads. So the whole Russian government in 2 years spent $46,000. Seriously? And this is an issue? Now, just to put this number in perspective about trying to influence an election, the first time the CIA got permission to interfere in an overseas election, and I don't remember the company, but it was right after World War II, and they got permission to go influence the election of some small country. And in the 1940s, the CIA was given permission to spend $10 million back then. That would be like at least $1 billion in today's dollars to go influence an election. And we're supposed to believe that the Russians influenced this election with $46,000. Are you kidding me? It's all fake. It's all fake. So that's about all I wanted to say about the tech giants trying to control our free speech. And as I said, what is going to end up happening if we don't stand up and say something is by the time 2020 comes, the liberals and the extreme left wing are going to control our free speech. Now, as a right winger or conservative and a Christian, I can promise you right now that my content is being scrutinized and censored as we speak. And I'll give you an example. I did a program not too long ago. Well, I guess it's been a couple of years now. Called it doesn't matter. Called Marriage. ... It ain't. That was the name of the show. And in that show, I was talking about homosexual marriages, and I made the case biblically and legally that no matter what the Supreme Court said, no matter what anybody says, homosexual marriage is not marriage. You can tell me the sky is blue or green all you want. You may even believe the sky is green, but that is not going to change the fact that the sky is blue. And that's the same here. You can tell me that homosexual marriage is legal. You may even believe homosexual marriage is good, but that's not going to change the fact that in God's eyes, homosexuality is a sin and it is by no means legal. Anyway, that I did that program and it got censored and nobody saw that program. I put it on a site where it was stored called Your Listen. Okay. And then what I do is I took that and then would link it to Facebook. Your Listen censored it right there, would not let it out. I linked it to Facebook, and as soon as it got there, it disappeared. So what they are doing now is going to magnify and be magnified. Put yourself ahead 4 years or 3 years from now, when we as conservatives or Christians or evangelicals are trying to get our word out, trying to do our programs, trying to give the news out. The show that I watch called Deep Six, the Deep State. Imagine the situation he's going to be in when somebody comes in and just beeps him out because he can't talk about homosexuality. So you're watching a 30-minute program and 10 minutes of it just goes blank with a blank screen. That's where we're headed. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, two men having homosexual sex on screen on Facebook is allowed to go. That's where we're headed. We need to stand up and do something. Now, those are the two issues I wanted to talk about. Now, another thing that I like to do on this show is something called current events. And I'd like to do this because I can't tell you how many times, I sit back and I think about things that have happened in the past. And I thought, I wonder what else was going on in that time and why did it get missed, or why was that such a big deal, and who was doing what. So every week when I do this, I like to add 2 or 3 issues that were going on this week so that we can keep everything kind of in line. And also, it kind of guards against liberals coming back and rewriting history and changing dates and weeks and years so that they can put forth what they consider to be facts when all they've done is rearrange the facts to suit their issues, which is common when liberals rewrite history. So this will just be a way of just safeguarding that. There was 3 that I wanted to talk about. Clinton buys off and controls DNC. Oh, this was huge. What a revelation this was. So Clinton, during the election, Clinton and Obama spent the Democratic Party into the poorhouse and did very little fundraising. So now the DNC is broke. So Hillary steps in and says, okay, they took care of their bills. And then, now listen to this. The Hillary campaign put the Democratic National Convention on a budget. Now remember, this is before the general election. This is when Bernie is still in the race. And Hillary, in exchange for giving the money, she controls who gets hired, who gets fired, the content that goes in and out of the DNC, the money that's spent, where she controls everything for the Democratic National Committee, and she's putting them on such a tight budget that there's no wiggle room. We just found this out because Donna Brazil has written a book. She's the one that took over after Debbie, what's her name, Schultz left. Donna Brazil comes in, finds all this out, and she's trying to put it back together. She happens to be a Bernie follower. And she's ticked off because, of course, now Hillary is doing everything she can to steal the election from Bernie, which is effective, by the way. But that revelation came out this week, and it is true, and it's huge. And again, another felony, a violation of election laws. Another. She is the most corrupt individual I've ever met or seen in my life, and I've been alive for a lot of years. This is absolutely despicable. President Trump took off on his Asian trip a couple of days ago. He's going to go to the Philippines, to China, South Korea. I don't know if he's going to Taiwan or not. I kind of doubt it. I wish he would. And this is an important trip because of several reasons. We're still having issues with North Korea banging their drums about trying to destroy the United States. So we're going to need China's help on that. And on the other hand, he's got to walk a tightrope because he's going to try to hold China accountable for manipulating the yuan over there. And the main purpose of the trip, though, is to calm everybody down over there, over North Korea, to let them know that we got their back. And if he does anything, we are going to go take care of it. Because under treaties signed after World War II, we are responsible for the defense of Taiwan, South Korea, the Philippines, Guam, and I think there might be one or two more over there that I don't know about. But anyway, we are responsible to take care for their defense, and we're going to do that. And he's going over there to assure them of that. Now, the next thing is, as we get ready in the next month or two to pass tax reform law, Trump has been in office a little over 10 months, around 10 months. In the last 6 months, that's 2 quarters, this country has had a gross national product growth of 3% in 2 quarters in a row. Now, when Obama was in office, it was usually around 1 or 1.2, 1.3, right in there. And Trump said he wanted to be during the election said he wanted it to be at 3%. And all the economists and everybody said that's not possible. You can't do that, no matter what you do. And all Trump has done is go out and talk common sense, get rid of all the regulations that are binding everybody back, and cut back some of the regulations. No tax law has been passed. No major legislation has changed. Nothing has changed in the real world. And we are now at 3% for 2 quarters in a row. My only caveat about that is this: if that tax law does not get passed by the end of this year, that's going to slow down. And it's going to go back to 1.2 or 1.3, because I believe this economy is going at 3% growth right now because they are anticipating tax reform and a massive tax cut. If that doesn't happen, businesses are going to retract and they're going to stop investing until something tangible happens. Well, that's about all I wanted to talk about. That covers current events. That covers the things I wanted to talk about. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for watching the program. And I also want to say, if this program and all the other shows I do are produced by the Prayer Box Ministry, if you'd like to know a little bit more about us, you can find us online at prayerboxministry.org. That's org.org. Go over there and check us out. It's an interactive site. There's lots to do over there. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week on This Week in Politics.